I slammed the door so hard the glass panels rattled in their frames. The photographs in my hand crumpled and sweating from the tightness of my grip, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break free. The taste of betrayal was sharp in my mouth, metallic and sour, as if I'd bitten into something rotten, something that had been festering behind my back for months. I could still see their faces, smug and stupid in the glossy prints. My husband, Mark, with his perfect smile that now made me want to claw his face off, and her, little Miss Secretary Barbie, perched on his lap like a goddamn trophy. My breath hitched, half a sob, half a growl, as I paced the living room, the heels of my boots thudding on the hardwood floors like war drums. He thought he was clever, thought he could keep it a secret. But the universe has a way of vomiting up the truth when you least expect it. I had found the photos by accident, shoved between the pages of his work portfolio like a perverted bookmark, each shot more sickening than the last. Hands tangled, mouths greedy, bodies pressed together in some cheap hotel room that stank of desperation and cheap wine. My mind flashed back to the night before, when he had come home late, the stench of another woman's perfume clinging to him so thick I could barely breathe. He lied so easily, so smoothly, looking me straight in the eye with that same mouth that had been whispering filth into her ear hours earlier. I felt like a fool, like a clown painted in red for everyone to laugh at behind their hands. No more. I was done playing the good wife, the patient idiot. If he wanted to humiliate me, I would burn everything he cared about to the ground. The idea hit me with the ferocity of a lightning strike, so bright and sudden it nearly made me stagger. His job, his precious, pristine job. He worked for one of the most uptight firms in the city, a place where reputation was everything and scandal was the kiss of death. His boss, Mr. Ellington, had the moral compass of a Sunday school teacher. Family man, pillar of the community, the kind of dinosaur who still believed that personal integrity was the backbone of good business. If he saw these photos, if he knew that Mark was screwing the hired help behind his wife's back, it would be game over. My fingers trembled as I laid the photos out on the coffee table, choosing the ones that would have the most impact. No point sending all of them. Just enough to tell the story without words, just enough to make Ellington's stomach turn. I selected 5. 5 devastating shots that spelled out everything. Mark's hand creeping up her thigh under the restaurant table, her lipstick smeared. Across his jawline in the back seat of his car, their bodies half undressed and intertwined. Her laughing with her head thrown back while he groped her like some horny teenager. Rage boiled under my skin, thick and oily, threatening to spill over and set the whole house on fire. I wanted to scream, to rip the curtains down, to smash every goddamn thing we had built together. But I forced myself to stay focused. Precision was key. This wasn't a tantrum. This was an execution. I found a blank envelope, crisp and professional, the kind used for corporate correspondence. I slid the photos inside, my hand steady now, fueled by a cold, ruthless satisfaction that made me feel invincible. I scribbled Ellington's name on the front, no return address, no note needed. The images would speak for themselves. They would scream. I envisioned him opening it, his brow furrowing in confusion, then darkening in horror as he flipped through the prints, each one a nail in Mark's professional coffin. He would have no choice but to act. They couldn't have someone like Mark representing their company, shaking hands at charity galas, smiling for the press. As I sealed the envelope, I whispered a bitter little prayer into the universe. A prayer for ruin, for collapse, for everything Mark valued to crumble into dust. He had built his life like a house of cards, balanced on lies and greed and ego, and now I was the hurricane come to tear it all down. I slipped the envelope into my purse and grabbed my keys, adrenaline singing through my veins, hot and electric. Outside, the night air was cold and bracing, cutting against my skin like knives. But I welcomed the pain. It kept me sharp, alive, purposeful. My car roared to life beneath me, the engine growling like a beast ready for blood. I drove through the city streets like a woman possessed, every red light daring me to stop, every green one egging me on. When I reached Ellington's gated neighborhood, my hands didn't even hesitate. I found his mailbox, pristine and polished like everything else in his life, and shoved the envelope deep inside. It was done. The trap was set. The bomb was ticking, and somewhere, miles away, my husband was laughing in another woman's arms, not knowing that by morning, his world would be in ashes. The drive home felt like floating through a fever dream, headlights smearing across my windshield, the city a blur of neon and shadow around me. I should have felt relief, triumph maybe, but instead, there was a gnawing hunger twisting in my gut, a beast that would not be satisfied until I saw the fallout with my own eyes. I didn't want just revenge. I wanted devastation. I wanted to see the panic in his face when he realized his perfect little life was crumbling around him, slipping through his fingers no matter how fast he tried to claw it back. I parked 2 streets over from our house and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The clock on the dashboard glowed 2:43 a.m. He would still be out, probably with her, curled up in some dimly lit bar or hotel bed, whispering promises he had once made to me. I thought about him, drunk on her, high on the thrill of new skin and cheap affection, and bile rose in the back of my throat. I wanted to crash into that world they had built for themselves, tear it apart piece by piece, make them feel the cold emptiness they had forced on me. When I finally stepped into the house, the silence was a living thing, pressing against my chest, heavy and suffocating. His jacket was tossed carelessly over the banister, his shoes kicked off in the hallway, as if this was still his kingdom and he was its beloved king. I stood there for a long minute, staring at his things, the casual disrespect of it, the arrogance, until a sudden wild rage seized me. I grabbed his jacket and hurled it across the room, then his shoes, then the stupid framed photo of our wedding that he had insisted we keep on the hallway table, as if it meant anything anymore. The glass shattered when it hit the floor, a beautiful, violent sound that cut through the silence like a scream. It felt good. It felt necessary. I kicked the shards away and marched upstairs, my boots thudding hard on the steps, each one a battle drum, each one a warning. I tore open his closet and ripped handfuls of his clothes from the hangers, hurling them onto the floor in a snarling, chaotic heap. The expensive suits he wore to impress clients, the soft cashmere sweaters he only pulled out for special dinners, every thread he thought made him untouchable now lay in a pitiful pile of fabric at my feet. I yanked open drawers and dumped their contents out, scattering cufflinks and watches and ties across the floor like broken promises. I wanted to erase him from this house, purge his presence like an exorcism. I stormed into the bathroom, his cologne bottles gleaming smugly on the counter, and without hesitation, I swept them into the sink and smashed them with the heavy marble soap dish. The scent burst into the air, thick and choking, a heady, nauseating reminder of the man I had loved and the liar he had become. When there was nothing left to destroy, I stood there in the wreckage, breathing hard, my hair clinging to my damp forehead, my hands raw and trembling. The house felt different now, stripped, emptied, brutal. It was no longer a shrine to a marriage that had died long before tonight. It was a battlefield, and I had won the first round. I collapsed onto the bed, not our bed anymore, not really, and stared up at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise and bring the reckoning with it. I didn't sleep. Sleep was for the innocent. I watched the room slowly lighten with the coming day, watched the bruised blackness of night peel away to reveal a sky that looked just as wrecked and hollow as I felt. At 6:30 sharp, I heard the front door creak open. His footsteps were light, hesitant, like he already knew something was wrong. I stayed where I was, silent, listening to the slight pause when he must have seen the wreckage in the hallway, the broken photo frame, the shards glittering on the floor like tiny knives. Another step. Another. He called out my name, tentative, a little too bright, as if pretending everything was normal could make it so. I didn't answer. I wanted him to come find me. I wanted him to walk up those stairs and see what he had done, laid bare in the ruins of the life we had built together. When he appeared in the doorway, the color drained from his face so fast it was almost funny. His mouth opened and closed, like a dying fish, his hand twitching uselessly at his side. I propped myself up on one elbow and looked at him, really looked at him, the way you look at something you used to love but now see clearly for the first time. Small, pathetic, unworthy. "What the hell happened?" he stammered, his eyes flicking, to the open closet, the broken glass in the bathroom, the wreckage of his carefully curated life. I smiled then, slow and mean, the kind of smile that promised nothing but blood. "You did," I said, my voice low and razor-sharp. "You happened." He blinked, confusion flashing across his stupid, handsome face, and I almost pitied him for a second. Almost. But then I remembered her laugh, high and giddy in those photos. Remembered his hand disappearing under her skirt while he grinned like the world belonged to him, and all pity turned to ash. Before he could sputter another word, his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. His body jerked at the sound, a twitch of pure animal panic, and he fumbled it out with trembling fingers. I didn't have to guess who it was. I knew. It was happening already. The beginning of the end. As he read whatever message had just come, "Through!" His face went slack with horror, his knees nearly buckling under him. He dropped the phone to the floor with a clatter, his mouth working silently as if trying to form words but finding none. I got up slowly, deliberately, savoring every second of his unraveling. I picked up his phone, glanced at the screen. It was a single line from Ellington. "See me immediately. We need to talk about your conduct." I tossed the phone onto the bed and looked him dead in the eye, feeling stronger than I had in months. Maybe in years. "Better get moving," I said coolly, brushing past him, letting my shoulder slam into his as I went. "Wouldn't want to keep your boss waiting." I didn't wait to see if he would follow my advice. I didn't care. I walked downstairs with a steady, almost serene calm, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm has flattened everything in its path. Behind me, I heard him scramble around, muttering curses under his breath, gathering what he could from the wreckage. His panic was a living thing, and I fed on it, savoring the bitter satisfaction as if it were the richest wine. In the kitchen, I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and scalding, and leaned against the counter while the minutes dragged by. I heard the front door open, then slam shut. I didn't even glance out the window to watch him leave. He wasn't worth the energy. I had bigger plans. This was only the beginning. The house was mine now, empty but powerful, like a lioness pacing, a territory she had reclaimed by force. I sipped my coffee slowly, thinking of what would happen next. He would go to Ellington's office, tail between his legs, and try to lie his way out of it. He would sweat and stammer, try to charm, to wheedle, to beg if he had to. But it wouldn't matter. Not with the evidence staring them all in the face, vivid and obscene. In the cold light of morning, the sins they had committed in secret looked even filthier, even smaller. I imagined the board meeting that would be hastily called, the stiff suits whispering to each other, glancing at the photos spread out like a crime scene. I imagined Mark's face, pale and desperate, as he realized that no amount of excuses could save him now. The fantasy bloomed in my mind, bright and vicious, and I smiled into my coffee. Hours passed. I cleaned the house with slow, deliberate movements, erasing every trace of him, purifying the space for whatever new life I would build from the ashes. I packed his clothes into garbage bags and piled them by the front door like trash waiting for pickup. I deleted his contacts from my phone one by one, feeling lighter with every name that disappeared from the screen. I changed the locks with a kind of grim pleasure, unscrewing the past from its hinges. At noon, the call came. It wasn't him. It was his secretary, the real one, the one he hadn't been screwing. The poor, overworked woman who had seen it all and kept her mouth shut. Out of professional courtesy, her voice was tight, almost apologetic. "Mrs. Harding," she said, "I thought you should know. Mark's been suspended pending further investigation. Effective immediately. I'm sorry." Sorry. I nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. Sorry didn't even begin to cover it. I thanked her sweetly, hung up the phone, and leaned back in my chair, feeling the last weight lift off my chest. It was happening faster than I had dared to hope. He was crumbling, just like I had planned. Every lie he told, every betrayal he committed, snapping back at him like a bear trap clamped tight around his throat. It wasn't enough. Not yet. I wanted to make sure the wound stayed open. I wanted it to fester. So I pulled out my laptop and started writing. The email was brief, surgical in its precision. I attached the same photos, added a few more I had dug up from old backup drives, the ones that showed him on company trips, arms too familiar around clients, drunken kisses at conference after-parties. I copied the entire senior management, team, his partners, and even a few clients I knew personally. I titled it simply, "For Your Awareness." No accusations, no explanations. Just the raw, rotting truth laid bare for anyone who cared to look. When I hit send, a delicious shiver ran down my spine. There was no pulling it back now. No denying, no gaslighting. No smooth words to untangle the web he had spun around himself. He was exposed, naked and pathetic, and I had been the one to drag him screaming into the light. I sat back and waited. It didn't take long. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was Mark. I stared at his name flashing on the screen. My heart, pounding with exhilaration, with victory, I let it ring. Once, twice. Then declined the call with a savage flick of my thumb. He called again, and again, and again. Desperation clawing at him like a wild animal. I let every call go to voicemail, savoring the knowledge that he must be, spiraling, must be realizing with every unanswered ring how utterly, completely he had lost. Finally, a text came through. "Please, we need to talk. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please." I read it once, twice, marveling at the cowardice packed into so few words. He didn't mean for it to happen? What had he thought would happen? That he could split himself into two men, one for home, one for the secretary, and never pay the price? That the two worlds he juggled so carelessly would never collide? I set the phone down carefully, as if it were something disgusting, something diseased. I had nothing left to say to him. Nothing he could offer would matter now. Not explanations, not apologies, not the pathetic whimpering he was probably working himself up to at that very moment. The house was silent again, but it wasn't an empty silence anymore. It was peaceful, empowered. Like the calm that comes after you've burned everything poisonous to the ground and stand alone in the clearing, breathing free air for the first time. I poured another coffee, stronger this time, and sat by the window, watching the sun blaze high and merciless over the city. Somewhere out there, Mark was learning that actions have consequences, that betrayal is a blade with two edges, and that when you stab someone who loved you, you damn well better expect them to come back swinging, and I wasn't done swinging yet. The hours crept by, slow and golden, each one more delicious than the last. By the time the sun had begun to dip below the skyline, my inbox was a war zone. Anonymous tips, rumors, whispers of a board meeting convened in emergency, Ellington's, icy fury slicing through the office like a scythe. I learned that Mark had tried to defend himself, pathetically, claiming the photos were old, taken before we were married, taken without consent, taken by enemies. Lies stacked on lies until even the most generous listener couldn't pretend to believe him anymore. They didn't fire him right away. No, they dragged it out, savoring it like a public execution. Suspension was only the beginning. Investigation, formal hearing, reputation torn apart like fresh meat in front of wolves. The city was small. News like this traveled faster than wildfire. By evening, whispers had become roars. Former clients pulled their contracts. Former friends ghosted his calls. Even the few sycophants who might have defended him were too afraid of getting splattered by the blood spray. He tried to come home again. I heard his car pull into the driveway around 7 p.m., the tires crunching over the gravel like a grim prelude. I didn't flinch. I didn't move from my chair by the window, where I sat nursing a third cup of black coffee and watching the world burn. I heard his key jam uselessly in the new locks, heard his muttered curse, his fists pounding against the door like a beggar, denied entry into the house that was no longer his. His voice cracked as he called my name, called me baby, called me please. The desperation in it made me want to laugh, a cold, cruel sound that would have felt right at home echoing off the hollow walls he had left behind. I stood up slowly and pulled the curtains aside, just enough to see him. He looked wrecked. His suit was wrinkled and stained, his tie hanging loose around his neck, his hair mussed and sweat-slicked. His face, God, his face, was the best part. Hollowed out, broken, sagging with disbelief. Like a man who had lost everything and still didn't understand how it had all slipped away, I opened the window just a crack, enough for him to hear me. "You don't live here anymore," I said, my voice flat and merciless. He turned to the sound like a whipped dog, eyes wide and pleading. "We can fix this," he stammered. "Please, just let me explain." "There's nothing left to fix," I cut in, slicing the words like a blade across the tender meat of his hope. "You made your choice. Now live with it." He took a step toward the window, hands outstretched, ridiculous in his helplessness. "It didn't mean anything. She didn't mean anything." The lie was so bold, so insultingly stupid, I almost admired it. Almost. But admiration was a luxury I no longer afforded him. "It meant enough to lose everything for," I said, and then, because some part of me wanted to twist the knife until he bled out completely, I added, "It meant enough to lose me for." I let that sink in, let it carve into him like acid, seeping into every wound he had opened between us. Then I closed the window, slowly, with deliberate finality, and drew the curtain back across. His voice rose into a desperate shout, muffled by the glass, by the wall, by the ocean of betrayal that now separated us. I sat back down in my chair, turned my face toward the darkness outside, and listened as his voice cracked, faltered, and finally fell silent. When I woke the next morning, his car was gone. So was he. I didn't wonder where he went. I didn't care. I had no space left inside me for anything but myself now. My survival, my healing, my victory. I filed for divorce the next day. I didn't even wait for him to be served properly. I sent the papers to his new secretary girlfriend's apartment address, letting her choke on the reality she had helped create. I knew it wouldn't last between them. Relationships built on betrayal are like buildings constructed in swamps. They sink, slow and inevitable, into the rot they were born from. Weeks turned into months, and with every passing day I grew stronger. I redecorated the house, painting over every trace of his existence with colors he would have hated. I traveled. I started laughing again, loud and shameless, the sound of a woman who had clawed her way out of hell and didn't apologize for surviving. Every now and then, whispers would reach me through mutual acquaintances. Mark spiraling through job rejections, Mark moving into a cheap apartment in a bad part of town. Mark getting drunk at the same dive bars where he used to sneer at the losers. I never sought them out, but when they came, I savored them like trophies displayed on a shelf. Proof that karma didn't need a guide. It found its way perfectly fine on its own. The last time I saw him was by accident, nearly a year later. I was walking through the city, head high, step sure, a life reborn under my feet. He crossed the street ahead of me, shabby, sunken-eyed, carrying a plastic bag of takeout and looking like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and looked away, too ashamed, too broken. Either way, it didn't matter. He was a ghost now. And I had made sure he would haunt only himself for the rest of his miserable life. I smiled to myself, turned on my heel, and kept walking. I didn't even look back.